Okay, so now I just move the camera. So I'm senior product manager for the release stage. It's important for me to note that the DORA4 metrics is a collaboration between a bunch of different stages and that I'm leading it, but there are additional stages that are also involved. Among them, the optimize group for manage and also monitor, and it used to be release management, and now it's all release. So it's a lot of work, and it's been a long time coming. So on the agenda today, we have a little bit of a DORA4 definition, what we have supported today, what's on the roadmap, and of course, questions. And I want you to feel free to ask me questions. You don't have to wait for the end of the presentation to ask, okay? So let's start with a little bit of an overview of what is DORA4 and why do we need it? And why does GitLab want to support it? So DORA is not just Diego's cousin and a friend of Boots. It comes from DevOps Research and Assessment. That's why it's called DORA. And it was established in 2019, which isn't that far long ago, to benchmark and identify elite performance of different companies, and to find a way for us to measure productivity and scaling. So the metrics that were defined, there's 4 of them. 2 of them measure velocity and 2 of them measure stability. And I'm going to present the metrics in a minute. And the real reason why this has been adopted really widely in the community has been because there's really no tangible way to measure ROI of DevOps. DevOps, as we know, is a process, and people invest heavily in recruiting a lot of people and buying infrastructure and buying a bunch of tools. And there's really no good way to know, hey, is this really doing anything for me? What's the ROI? It's not something that you can, sell for cost and then figure out if this is something that's worth the investment. Process is much harder to measure, and that's why DORA is a really great way for us to measure the SDLC process. So that's kind of why it's important and why it was adopted. And we as GitLab have a really great momentum to bring DORA4 metrics into our platform. Being as that we're a single tool application, we have a bunch of this data already. And so the challenge now is just to surface it to the users. But anyone who's using GitLab end-to-end can really benefit from all of this data and just learn from it without having to integrate yet another tool to figure out whether their DORA4 metrics are working okay or not. So with that brief introduction, here are the 4 DORA4 metrics. The first one is deployment frequency, which is how often we deploy to production. And the word production here is really important. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go forward with this presentation. And you can see that DORA4 also kind of grouped the performance based on organizations that did well based on these metrics. So an elite performer is someone who's doing multiple deployments per day. High performers are once per day or once per week, and then it goes lower in terms of performance. Lead time for changes is how long it takes from code that you actually write to actually hit production. There's actually a lot of controversy about how we plan to measure this, and it's definitely something that we can talk about, and kind of I'll tell you what the different ideas are. Time to restore service, how long it takes to recover from an incident, or pull out a hotfix or whatever. And change failure rate is how, in percentage, how often do we recover from these failures, whether it's a hotfix or rollback or something like that. So what I wanted to show in this slide is kind of Google's definition. So DORA4, or at least the DORA4 metrics, was purchased by Google. And if you search for DORA4 today, you'll get to a Google website that has all these definitions. And so deployment frequency is how often an organization successfully releases to production. Again, production is the main environment that we're talking about. I'll talk a little bit about how we can kind of escape that role within GitLab. But really DORA4 by the textbook definition is all about production. And successfully is also really interesting because we have a lot of deployments that are in pending or in fail state. That's not interesting. If to be counted as deployment frequency, it has to be successful. And so deployment frequency by GitLab's definition is pretty similar. We have the average deployment frequency to production for a specific time. So we normalize it by the dates, and then we get to the deployment frequency. But obviously, deployment frequency for 7 days will be different than 30 days. It will be different than 90 days. So everything is normalized by the timestamp that is chosen by the customer. And it is based on the deployment's end time. So it has to be finished properly, and the end time is when the deployment is considered done. Lead time for changes is the next metric. The textbook definition is the amount of time it takes for a commit to get into production. And our GitLab take on it was the average time it takes for merge requests to get merged and then deployed to production. So we didn't look at commits, we're looking at merge requests. And the reason why we did that is because in every customer conversation that I had, people were super comfortable with merge requests and found it to be more interesting than just commits. And so we're going the GitLab way and counting it by merge request. We have a little bit of a controversy regarding how we're exactly going to implement this, because the textbook definition is how long it takes for code committed to get into production. But there's actually 2 stages for that to happen. One of them is for code to be merged, but not necessarily to production. So just, commit to merge. And we already present in 13.9, the optimized team has already presented merge request metrics. So you can find the mean time to merge of merge requests. And then the second portion of this lead time for changes is how long after a merge request was approved and merged, how long does it actually get deployed to production? So we're kind of in debate whether we should count the time from the merge request being created until it hits production, like the definition, or if we should split them into 2 because we already know the mean time to merge and just check the deployment time. And why is this important? Because let's say you don't deploy over the weekend, and now you're counting all this average time for a merge request to get to production. The data gets a little bit skewed. So it doesn't really show you real data of how long that time, the lead time for deployment is. It'll show you an average time of everything combined together. So I'm happy for anyone to chime in or to write in the agenda doc what they think, and we'll take that into the conversation that we have next week on deciding exactly how to measure that. The third one is change failure rate. And Google's definition is percentage of deployments causing a failure in production. And the way that we're planning on measuring this, there's actually 2 ways. So the MVC is going to be the first one, which is the count of incidents divided by deployment count. So you have to be using incident management with GitLab in order to get this metric. And another way that we will expand after we finish the MVC is for users that don't use incident management with GitLab. We're thinking of measuring degradations reported in MR. So I'm going to quickly skip to the end of my presentation just to show you what I'm talking about, and then we'll go back. In merge request today, we have this really nice report that tells you, was there a degradation in code quality or security or compliance or even performance? So one thing that we're thinking about for expansion is using this report and saying, okay, degradation of service was that the MR was merged even though there was something red in the report. Last one is time to restore service, which by the Google definition is how long it takes for an organization to recover from a failure in production. And this is also going to go into 2 takes. The first iteration is still leaning on incidents, the average duration of when an incident goes from open to close. And expansion of that for non-incident management users will be, for example, how many rollbacks occurred And how do we define rollbacks in GitLab? We don't really, but we have a way to overcome that by counting redeploys that we have and checking if that pipeline ID of that redeploy was older than the current pipeline that we have in production. So that's another way to count time to restore service. I'm going to pause if anyone has questions.
Orit, the last one, for the last two, from my perspective, it seems as though it makes more sense to use the first two metrics because they're actually the metric. Like the second one, the time to restore service is an example, measuring how many rollbacks occurred. That's a count. That's not how long it took you to restore service.
Yeah, you're right. I should be more accurate. The idea is to lean on how many rollbacks occurred and how long they took.
Because I can, from my perspective, I think the closer that we are aligned to the DORA4, you know, customers know what the DORA4's metrics are, and I think that, you know, there's a lot of weight behind the DORA4, and it's sort of gaining momentum. So I think if we iterate too much and then sort of move away from the sort of standard understanding of what the DORA4 is, and the lead time for changes is an interesting one. That we risk devaluing them. Oh, they're kind of, yeah, someone's put DORA4, GitLab, or a version of the DORA4. And I feel like that's the point at which customers might be like, just like, okay, well, we want to see the DORA4. It would be great to see your additional metrics, but yeah, so I think
so we do have an issue for counting commits. Again, I validated this with users and no one wanted to see commits. They all wanted merge requests. But if I see that there will be a need, we'll definitely add that. It's pretty easy.
The lead time for changes one, from my perspective, is an interesting one because from the way I read it, is it's the lead time for basically how long does it take for a change to be started to get it into production. And I think change started for me is probably the first commit on an MR. Like it's not the subsequent commits because it's all part of that same change. So I would probably, and the reason why I differentiate that from the MR being created is because sometimes MRs sit there without any commits on them for a little while, actually, and discussions going on as to how should we attack this problem before the first change is actually made. But yeah, it's interesting because yeah, they are very much open to interpretation, and yeah. So
that's a really good point. I'm going to make a note of that to add it to one of our suggestions. Basically, we could at one point support any of these variations. Is just deciding the MVC because we have all this data. So we could really allow the user to pick and choose at some point. We have everything. So I think that's what one of our biggest advantages. We'll see what users ask for, and we can then, you know, iterate towards that.
A quick, more generic question. These DORA4 metrics, is the intention behind that organizations want to compare themselves with other organizations, or is it whether you want to track whether you make progress or have a degradation on some of these metrics inside an organization? What's the main driver?
That's a great question, Ralph, and thank you for asking. So there's really two personas that we're targeting for these DORA4 metrics. The first one, and I would say the primary one, is the executive person who wants to see their ROI on their investment on DevOps or their SDLC. And they are mostly interested in seeing their organizational-wide metrics, and there's two things that are interesting. One is the aggregated data of all the company. They want to see how often everyone is deploying. And the second point is they want to compare groups and teams of developers inside their organization to see who is performing better than others. Maybe that's a point to learn from someone from a really great performing team or someone that needs some help. A really interesting take that we can leverage as GitLab is that anyone using SaaS, for example, we can anonymize data and show you how you're performing versus other organizations in your field. And in your field is TBD. So it can be, you know, sorry?
I mean, we already have that comparison on GitLab.com. Not with the DORA4 metrics, but we do have that I think this one.
You're talking
I
about the
don't remember
DevOps
what the
dashboard,
page-
right?
Yeah, this is one dashboard where you can see how you are comparing against.
That's only at the instance level, Ralph. Customers don't have
That's-
access to that.
That's instance level, and that's so it's actually self-managed only that we have that DevOps dashboard, which is obviously being deprecated. So that was actually leads on nicely to my question, which was that they would be really great to actually have the DORA metrics that we're talking about here as the next iteration of the DevOps dashboard. I think that would be hugely cool. And the customers would see a lot of value in that, which I think part of the reason why the DevOps dashboard is being kind of semi-deprecated is because some customers were struggling to see the value of it. But
So I've seen Optimize, they have a really nice roadmap of showing the adoption of the different stages that you have in DevOps. And I think they also wanted to present the DevOps score based on that. So I think that's kind of similar to what we're discussing here. What I mean is it's really hard to define what's a company like mine when you want to compare it to others. Is it just everyone on GitLab.com? Is it someone in my tech? Is it someone who has the same amount of seats that I have? Is it someone who has, I don't know, the same amount of projects? We can define this going forward, but I think it's a really great space to be in where we can actually give that DORA4 score based on customer data that we have, and everything, of course, has to be anonymized. Also, still related, but really interesting. I've been reading a lot of trends and blogs in the industry, and apparently high-performing teams, they can kind of get their wings. So the amount of permissions that you're allowed to do in your team has to do with how well your team is performing. And so someone may get permission to deploy to production based on their DORA4 score. If they're doing really well, then their team can deploy automatically to production, then they don't have to go through some manual approval. So this is really kind of introducing gamification, and we want to add like badges in the future and show you how your score is doing. So this can really influence the process of development in any organization.
That's cool. Orit, are we going to be tracking these DORA4 metrics over time and storing them somewhere, maybe in the usage ping data, so that we can start tracking these for customers?
We probably should.
Let's put it this way, we definitely should.
We definitely should. I agree. I'm going to open up an issue for that. What I have been tracking right now, maybe I'll show that in the end of the presentation, is actually how, sorry about that, how people started using the DORA4 metric. So we placed DORA4, and that's in my next slide, but we placed DORA4 kind of in not the best place at the moment. It's currently hidden under CI/CD analytics under the project level. And DORA4 is important enough to have its own landing page. But for iteration purposes, we just started with what we own. And once we get the 4 in place, I think we'll move it out. But just for, you know, a starting point, that's where we put it. And I've been tracking to see how users have been using CI/CD analytics before that. And after we released the first DORA4 metric in December, I think it was. And there was an increase of 1,200% of page views just to that page. So people are definitely excited about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited about this. When you talk about lead time for changes, that seems to be a subset of our value stream analytics within the project. Do you see one supplanting the other? Where do you see sort of our DORA4 working with our value stream analytics at the project?
That's a great question. Do you mind holding off on it?
Okay. I thought you might cover it later, but fair enough. Yes, I will hold off.
Anything else?
Are we working off the question sheet, or is it okay to jump in with a question here?
Well, feel free to jump in. And then worst case, we'll just go through the question sheet to make sure we didn't miss anything at the end.
So one thing as I think about DORA4, I wonder about what type of customer where it is most interested in these metrics. And the reason I bring this up is if it is, in my mind, it's usually more larger enterprises that want a broader view across the organization. And if that's the case, there are some things I'm not sure GitLab is the best place to capture or to measure the metric. For example, time to restore service, MTTR, is very much a ITIL service management type of metric. And any large enterprise I think of will have something like ServiceNow or some other large service management platform that would be the source of truth for that info. So just wondering what, I guess, or what, who we're targeting with this message and who's most interested in this.
So I've definitely spoken to enterprises that are interested in this. Something that has come up a lot is that they don't necessarily want to view this data inside GitLab, and they might want to export the data outside of GitLab. And we've decided to also supply APIs in addition to the UI, so you can import that into external systems. I've seen customers, especially in the financial industry, where they have like Jira data, they want GitLab data, they want ServiceNow data, they want data from everywhere, and they just place it in some monitoring tool based on the APIs. So that's definitely been a use case. I have heard lots of customers, also enterprises, that they use this tool to kind of convince their bosses on why this is important. So I don't know, I guess it's very specific to the need of the organization. I think the need for DORA4 support is across all types of organizations, enterprises, and also small, medium businesses. I think when you look at it, as I said, the primary persona that we're targeting is the executive buyer, but also individual teams and team leads are really interested to see how well they're performing and how they're continuously improving over time for each one of these different metrics. And that's also really, really important. So the team can benefit from it, the group can benefit from it, the organization can benefit from it. So it's a rather wide range.
Thank you for that.
Okay, moving on. So what do we already have supported? And so I linked here a speed run. It's also linked on the issue that I created to show how you can use these APIs and how to view the metric in the system, but I'm going to go through it anyway. This is what the API looks like for deployment frequency. This is already supported at the project level. You can see that what we need here is the project ID specifically. And then you have the environment. So it can be any environment in the API. It doesn't have to be production. And some companies are really excited about this. I just talked to a prospect, financial industry, heavy on compliance and regulations, and they're super excited about having DORA4 metrics. But they only deploy to production like once a quarter because they have all this like red tape to go through. What they like to do is they like to test out their upgrades in a staging, whatever production-like environment, and they bring down that environment to whatever version production currently has, and then they do an upgrade and they test how long it takes end to end to do that upgrade. So they were super excited about having this ability to choose any environment they want and any timestamp they want. The group level deployment frequency is already available on production, but it is hidden behind a feature flag. So it's really not available unless you have GitLab admin permissions, and then you can turn it on. The plan is during this milestone of 1310 to enable it. We did see some performance issues, so we want to solve that before enabling the feature flag for everyone. So even if it doesn't make 1310, it'll most likely make 1311. And this is what this looks like in terms of the project level chart. This already exists today. What you can see is, as I mentioned, we didn't place it in its final resting home, but if you want to find it today or show anyone, you can go through under the project analytics CI/CD. The regular landing page is for pipelines. We introduced a new tab called deployments. And once we have all four, this is going to change to DORA4. but at the moment we only have deployments, so it didn't make sense to call it DORA4. So we called it deployments, and what you can see here is a graph of the deployments, and these are the fixed dates. So last week, last month, and last 90 days. You can see there's a discrepancy between this and the API. The API lets you choose any timestamp, and here we hard-coded it because of performance issues. I'm sure we're going to work on this, but this is currently what we show. In the far future, we would let anyone choose whatever date they want, and also the environment. Right now, this is only showing production environment. And I think I have a slide about talking about production environment, but if not, I'll go back to this and discuss it. So currently there's a limitation that in order to view this data, your environment must be named production. This is going to change really, really soon. But value stream analytics works exactly the same way. And so value stream analytics that we show today are only on environments named exactly production. I'm going to pause. No, nothing. Okay, let's continue. Bonus points. Not exactly related to DORA4, but it's kind of a little bit related to it. We introduced in 13.9 something called release analytics. This is available on the group level. And this shows how many releases you have in your group of projects and how many are associated to releases. And why is this semi-related to DORA4? Because it's the first place we ever added group level CI/CD analytics. So this is going to be the landing page for DORA4, similar to what we saw on the project level with pipelines. I see that I didn't talk about production, so let me just pause for a minute and talk about the production environment. We had a little bit of conversations about how we can expand the naming convention of production. Having a production environment called exactly production kind of sucks. Also because people don't really follow that. Some people have multiple production environments. We at GitLab ourselves call our production environment GPRD, so we can't even dog food it. And so there's a lot of limitations. So we had some different conversations. One of the ideas was to make a regex option to have anything that like has prod in it. But then we thought, wait, pre-production also has prod in it, or again, GPRD doesn't follow that. So we thought maybe just PR, but that just makes so many false positives. And so what we're introducing in this milestone, and is a really interesting concept, is allowing you to name your production environment whatever you want, but introducing on the YAML level a type. So you can call your environment banana, but make it a type production. And these graphs will, and also the value stream analytics will align to this as well. If anything has a type production, that's going to show up on these charts. And if you didn't add the YAML, it's going to stay with this limitation of production name.
So this is, just to clarify, this is an expansion of the environment settings in the YAML. So environment, and then type is production. Yeah.
So you're going to have a type that's either staging or dev, or unknown is also okay. But a lot of our features lean on this naming convention that really doesn't make any sense. So we want it to be as flexible as possible. Not related to DORA, but this is also going to the first step to introducing group level environments. So we're really excited about it.
That's cool. I guess my question, like edge case type things, like what if you say there are multiple environments, you've got banana and donut, and they're both production, will they both be reported on this chart then as a result?
Yes.
Okay.
The idea is, we think that you can't assume that there's only one production environment, especially when you're thinking about multi-cloud deployments and I don't know, like just a bunch of stuff. A bunch of applications have a lot of production environments, so we don't want to assume there's only one.
Okay.
Again, at one day in the future, we would have a dropdown that would allow you to select any environment that you want to see here. So multiple as well.
Yeah, hey, just a couple of thoughts on how to evaluate if an environment is actually production or not. Of course, adding this new attribute makes a lot of sense. Maybe another approach could be looking if the associated branch is a protected branch or not.
So we have the
assuming-
concept of protected environment as well. I would definitely lean on protected environment before protected branch.
Yeah. Makes sense. Also, probably the second one could be how long has the environment actually been active? Because I don't know, like, are we going to use this environment type attribute for some other use cases as well?
Yes, so its original purpose was to introduce the group level environment, which is something that we've been asked for many customers, because at the moment, if you want to define a protected environment, it goes by project. And so if you have 600 projects, but one production environment, you have to define that in each and every one of the projects, and people are getting annoyed at it.
Yeah, painful. Okay, cool. I'm actually quite excited. You mentioned a bit earlier that you've done some customer research. Can you share that data, please? I'd love to go through that.
Yeah, I need to look through it because this is a really old and collaborative effort. So I need to look through some of Jeremy's notes and Jackie's notes and my notes, but definitely I'll be happy to share this.
Yeah, and the purpose from me asking that question is me anticipating questions from customers why we are doing things this way. And then I have actually some solid data-based answers to respond to them. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if any of you hear anything from customers, please share the data with me. The more I learn, the better we can deliver this. So also, customers, when we say DORA4, they get all excited and they ask for a bunch of different metrics that have nothing to do with DORA4. And so that's just a little bit of a pitfall that we have in every customer conversation. Oh, but I want to know how many jobs I'm doing, or I want to know end to end an upgrade, how long it takes, which is really interesting, but it's not DORA4.
And so right now, this is at the project level, but you're going to be moving this to the group level. That's right.
Yes, okay. The plan is, and I think I have a slide on that too, but the plan is to support everything on the project and group level, both for API and for UI, these charts. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions when we talk about tiers, but at the moment we decided not to support instance level metrics. And the idea that the reason behind that is one of our goals is SaaS first. And SaaS is in a disadvantage in terms of instance level metrics. We can't show it. The managed team has a really interesting concept that they want to introduce called Workspace, which allows you to define a group of your projects for an organization. And once that's supported, we would support that as well for semi-instance level or organizational level metrics.
I think you mentioned a really interesting point there, but very, very quickly and skipped over it. So just to confirm, all of the data that's creating these charts is going to be available from the API as well, because a lot of the metrics we currently have, a lot of the dashboards we have currently are not available as API routes. And I've got a lot of customers that are asking about DORA4s and metrics, but they want to put it into their own metric, their own dashboard, analytics dashboard effectively. So that's a huge point there, actually.
Yeah, that's one of the first things I learned from customer interviews. They wanted a way to export it. So we did API first. We also had the front end leaning on these APIs. So it shortened the development time in that sense. So it made a lot of sense to do API first. And value stream analytics today show some of these data as well. And I think that was a question before. And so they're going to be aligning to our data. They're also helping us develop some of these APIs. So we're all aligning to this API structure. And the last thing that we want to do is show different data in different places in our product. We want to be showing the consistent data. And so we're all going to be aligning to these APIs and to the definition of the production environment.
Hey, stupid question. Sorry. Are there different parts of the organization working on value stream in this? Like, how does that work?
Not a stupid question. Smart question. We're working really closely and collaborating with the Optimize team. Optimize team have developed the value stream analytics. I'll show you what that looks like after I finish the presentation, just because I'm a little bit of a Zoom idiot and I don't know how to get back to the presentation and to the product, but I'll remind me at the end to show you what that looks like. And so they have a lot of this data, but not in charts and not in API. They have a tile view where they tell you deployment frequency is 30, something like that. So some of this data exists, but we're going to realign it. And the idea is that at the end of the day, the DORA4 metrics are supposed to be super detailed, and the value stream analytics is the first maybe starting point, but you can drill down into the DORA4 metrics. So I want to give you an example. If we look at this chart right here, we know that there was a deployment in December 19 and in February 7, but we don't really understand anything that happens in between. So what we want to do is add to these charts annotations, like here was a deploy freeze and here was a release date. And so it'll make a lot more sense when you look at it to understand at a glance what's happening in this section at all.
Yeah, maybe an overlay with like the blue shows deployments to production, but red might show deployments to staging. So you can see, yeah, we've been deploying to staging, but we haven't been deploying to production. And maybe there's some information in there that can be gleaned.
Yeah, there's a lot of ideas. And another thing that we're really excited about with DORA4 is that it's kind of an entry point to a bunch of hidden features, like what I like to call it. We have so many great features at GitLab, but no one knows about them. So we could help customers improve their metrics based on the fact that we can point them to different things. So let's say your deployment frequency is rather low, and there's a bunch of manual approvals or manual jobs in your pipelines. We could kind of share that with information with the customer and say, hey, it would be, maybe you can think if you really need this manual job, or maybe you can make a run book out of it and make it more automatic and increase your deployment frequency. Or let's say your time to restore is really slow. We can say, hey, did you know that we have auto rollback? Why don't you try enabling it? Or, you know, point them to different features that can help them out throughout their workflows.
Yeah, the corollary to that, and it's funny you mentioned that because Brian Wald and I were actually slacking on the side about this, is if people aren't using those features, like incidents, for example, I guess we can try and lead them down that path, but it feels like we're trying to force people to use our functionality in order to get these metrics. And while I guess it's optimistic to take the view that people might start using that functionality, we also have to account for folks that won't use that functionality because they have other tools that do it better, for example. So you can look at it from glass half full, glass half empty kind of perspective.
Well, I think that for incidents, it's particularly an interesting one, right? Because I think our time to recover, right? Because I think that's the one that most everyone has separate tools for, including GitLab uses a separate tool for that, right? So I wonder if, because it's only potentially just one of those, and a lot of the other ones, I would say realistically, a lot of people would be using, there be a future state where we maybe could import information to that so you could still have a good dashboard of all of this stuff in one place, right? So like something like a API that would, allow us to put information back into that. Has that been considered? Because I think that would be helpful, because a lot of people might want to use the dashboard to see all of that information, but if they start to have to diverge for certain aspects of it, which will likely be the case, or pretty much all customers, having a small amount of that being pushed back to it would give us more value around what the dashboards look like holistically.
Yeah, so absolutely, it has been considered, and I don't want to force anyone to do anything. But we needed to decide where to start from, and starting with the GitLab value first was easier, and B, we kind of want to do cross-stage collaboration and get people to get the best value that they can from a single tool. Having said that, we absolutely understand that people are not using GitLab for every single stage of their DevOps pipeline. And we can integrate with a bunch of tools, but we need to find the justification to do that, and also what to start from. So it really depends on the feedback that we'll get from the field and from customers on what they want to see. Another solution, I don't want to jump to solutions because I think that the problem is really interesting, but we can introduce webhooks that would just create these incidents for them. And then you don't have to use the incidents, but it's there to rely on in terms of the metrics. And again, a lot of the customers that I talk to, they don't even want to see these metrics in GitLab. They just want a way to export it. So I don't know, that's just how we decided to start, but I'm sure as we show this to more people and more people get excited, we'll have more requests to support ServiceNow or PagerDuty or whatever is out there.
I have a quick example. I had a conversation with the customer yesterday around metrics in general, value stream, DORA4, everything. And the problem is that they're using Argo CD for deployments. And it's the same situation with incidents management, for example, but for the deployment part of things. And it's just that we need that event back in GitLab saying, hey, it was deployed successfully or not, and integrate that into everything. So we can show them the metrics, because we have the rest of it, right? With merge requests, commits, issues, everything. Just these small points are missing, it seems, in some scenarios.
First of all, Vlad, I would love to be in touch with this customer if you can connect me to understand why they're using Argo CD instead of GitLab or what's missing. But having said that, I understand that a lot of people are going to choose external CD solutions. DORA4 rely on deployment to production. It's very much around production. We could probably introduce a webhook from an external tool, but it would take a lot more effort, I think, to get this data inside.
I mean, just to put this out there, like, isn't this, I'm just playing devil's advocate, so forgive me, but like, this is the benefit of being an open, and I'm going to use the new branding words, the open DevOps platform. Being a platform gives us the ability to have these DORA metrics in our platform. Nobody else can do this because they don't have that end-to-end visibility, but we have to have that end-to-end visibility in order to create these metrics. So like, having GitLab and then going, oh, you're going to bolt on Argo CD, I'm going to bolt on another like PagerDuty as an incident management tool, then you haven't got this platform, and then you don't have that end-to-end visibility. I'm all for the idea of, hey, yeah, maybe we could add some API endpoints so that we could like add these, but these could be huge pushes to adopt the platform thinking here. So just, hey, preaching to the choir.
Yeah, that's true. But in some cases, the product maturity isn't there yet. While still with some of these, let's call them workaround or shortcuts, we can get value to the customer quicker, if you will. And Orit, the plan was to reach out to the PM team and have a session with this customer to find out more about their use case, get that feedback back to the PM team. Yeah, I'll follow up with you on that. Thanks.
Great. Again, the DORA4 metrics rely on deployments, and they rely on environments. And if you don't manage them in GitLab, I think it's going to be a little bit tricky. I'm not saying impossible, because we can solve anything. But again, when we have to choose priorities, it has to have a really good business justification.
So one question I have, Orit, have you thought about overlaying? I know this graph specifically speaks to deployments, but have you thought about overlaying the development cadence with the deployment data, right? Because if you think about it, there's the concept of like you're always developing, right? And then you're choosing to deploy on demand, right? It would be really interesting to see, let's get GitLab for example, right? We get GitLab developing on a monthly cadence, right? And then, especially in GitLab.com, deploying constantly. I would love to see an overlay of these two data points to see how is our cadence going, and at the same time, the outcomes of those cadences get into production, if it makes any sense.
It does. It actually ties nicely to what I was discussing in the beginning, where we were kind of debating how to define lead time for changes or lead time for MRs to get merged. Because on the one hand, we have MRs getting merged all the time to different environments, but they don't really get deployed to production at that same take. So, so having those two side by side could kind of show you the difference between them. I think the idea of having staging or whatever environment, the staging type, banana and donuts, one by one could give you that visibility as well. Absolutely. It's really interesting. We have also metrics for, as I mentioned, mean time to be merged, not on the DORA4, but on the value stream analytics side. So we have a lot of this data. I do think at some point we need to consolidate everything to one page and then have people drill down to whatever they want, you know, by clicking into different things and having all this development metrics in a consolidated place that anyone can look into what they're specifically interested in.
That would be really cool. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so timeline. I'm sure all of you are really interested in about when are we going to develop all of this great stuff. So deployment frequency, I put it in green because it's already supported and you can already access it. Group level API, as I mentioned, is hidden behind the feature flag, but is available. So we're fixing the group level API in 13.10, and we believe that we will be able to present that first group level chart for deployment frequency in 13.11. In 13.10, we're working on the project level lead time for changes API. So that's really exciting. And Optimize team is helping us out at the release team with working on the change failure rate API. So we'll have at least the project level API for 3 of the 4 done by the end of this quarter. First class production environments is that concept that I talked about, having that environment type in the YAML file. I put it here, even though it's not exactly directed to DORA4, but still really interesting. We're working on it now. Going forward, lead time for changes. So I'll remind you, we had the API in this quarter. We should have the project level charts, hopefully in 14, if that's not a monstrous deprecation milestone, group level API in the next milestone, and then the group level charts in 14.2. So by the end of Q2, we'll have both deployment frequency fully, project level and group level, and lead time for changes. In addition, Optimize team is working, this is still release team, project level charts for change failure rate, which is being developed here in the first quarter in API. And the Optimize team is taking on the second metric of time to restore and developing that project level API. So by the end of Q2, we'll have 3 out of the 4 API level and 4 out of the 4 API level and 2 complete ones, including UI, and change failure rate will be API and project level charts. In Q3, the plan is to complete change failure rate to be everything and to have project level time to restore services. And by the end of the year, we should have everything, all the 4 metrics, both API, project level, and group level. And then we'll introduce the tiers. So any question about timeline, and you know this is GitLab, so we're not committing to it. This is our plan, but I think we can do it. So before we go to tiers, any questions about timelines?
Sorry, my question was about tiers, but I see that we've prioritized Ultimate first. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So DORA4, we've established, is super important. We started with placing it in Ultimate first. And the idea was just to make it simpler for our developers to start developing something without going into logic of tiers of what they need to start, checking licenses and so on. We wanted to put everything in place. And then we're going to start opening it up for other types of users. And we really want everyone to be able to benefit from DORA4. So I want to show you what we have planned for each one of the tiers. And this is the plan for this year. We have a bunch of things that we just discussed in addition, like selecting the environments, annotations, having overlays on the graphs. Those will probably go to paid tiers, but I don't have a plan for that yet because this year is just getting those DORA4 metrics in place. So we talked about this. Oh, I did have a slide about it. This is what the YAML is going to look like in terms of the type, sorry. So we have environment, extension, the name of the environment already exists, and then the type. So that's just what the YAML will look like. And there's a link in the presentation if you want to check out that issue as well. So for the MVC, we mentioned everything is going to be under Ultimate. It includes project level, group level API, and UI for both project level and group level for all metrics. Next year, we'll change this by tiers. So I want to show you the mockups and what they're going to look like, unless there's questions before the mockups. Cool. Okay, so DORA4 core. This is a little bit similar to what value stream analytics showed today. And so what you can see here, there's a small tile that gives you a numerical value of the different DORA4 metrics. So you'll have deployment frequency, 12.1. You can't drill down into anything, you just get a value. Okay? For premium, what we want to do is show what we're showing in core, but also allow you to see the project level charts, each one of the metrics for project level. Okay? And last but not least, Ultimate will see everything that the premium and core users are seeing, but they're also going to see the group level deployment frequency. And group level deployment frequency is really interesting. We're going to show two things here. So at the beginning of what we defined for the MVC, we're going to show aggregation. So this is going to show the aggregated data of all the deployment frequency on all the projects that are associated to a group. But what's really also interesting is comparing different projects within a group. And so that data is also going to be available at the group level, and you can see the different metrics of each project individual. I'm going to pause because I'm sure there's a lot of questions now. Maybe I'm wrong.
I kind of like this approach of giving them a little taste of it in core, a little bit more data in premium, but make sure that we put the big value proposition for the DORA4 stuff in Ultimate.
Yay.
Agreed.
And you're probably not seeing chat, but everybody is like, they want this in Ultimate because I think it's a big value add for Ultimate.
I think so too. Almost all the release features went to core last year. So there's really hardly any Ultimate features left in release. I think this one is super valuable, brings a lot of value. Value stream analytics today are in premium, so that's something to think about because we're showing a lot of the same data.
And that's what I might get from customers for sure.
Yeah,
yeah, they're going to say, why are you putting this in Ultimate when we can see 75% of it in premium already, kind of thing. So there really has to be, I don't know what you want to call it, the fireworks in Ultimate to really draw people to using it in Ultimate.
Yeah, I agree. And this is going to rely a lot on the feedback from you all. Again, this year is only going to be in Ultimate. So our decision to change tiers may change next year, and that's going to rely heavily on feedback that the field is going to give us on this. I like the fact that we are giving something for every tier. I think the workspace, once that's supported, is going to be huge value for Ultimate as well. Once you can show, just the workspace of your organization, showing benchmarks to other customers like you is a great value that we will give in Ultimate. So there are a lot of features that I'm thinking are going to be available only for Ultimate. But it's since we're really in MVC state, I think it's important for you to understand like where my head is right now, what the plan is for this year, and then how we're going to still deliver value in the future.
Yeah, this looks awesome. What can we do to help you?
Give me feedback. Give me feedback from customers. That's what like the best help that I can have. The whole team is like super excited about this. I promised to share. Let's go into SciSense for a minute, and I'll show you just what the graph looks like. It's just amazing.
Just really quick, Orit, and one thing that I would have as a PM on the forefront of my mind is performance. That can be a lot of data, we know that. And then sometimes, for example, as SA, we want to like just demo stuff on .com, but there's so much data, it takes so long to load that it ends up looking bad, right? So I'm sure you're aware of that better than I am. But anyhow, just want to point that out. The important.
Thank you, Hugo. I actually just opened a bug about that because last month you could open the DORA4 metrics on GitLab.com or GitLab.org projects, and now it just times out. So, and I think that's because I think that happened because we consolidated the views so that you can just check whether you want the last week or 30 days, and that used to be 3 different charts. So even though like the last one would load really slowly, you still got data on the page. And now it just does all the queries together. So we're working on performance in 13.10. That's also why we limited the timestamps that you can view at the moment, the charts, even though the API is totally open.
Cool.
So I wanted to show you CI/CD analytics page views. And again, I told you that's not going to be the last place that DORA4 is going to be placed, but that's where we started. So look at this. We delivered the first DORA4 at the end of December. And this is how useful this page was before the first DORA4 metric. So like 44 users, and you can see the spike. So this is definitely being received really well. Mind you, this dropped because it's the middle of the month, and so the data is not complete yet.
Yeah, that's cool.
Hey, this
10x there, if I can, more than 10x, yeah.
This is a dashboard of all projects on .com.
This is anyone who accessed it. Okay. And again, this is only ultimate users, so you already know that this is limited to the number of views it actually can have.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I love this. I mean, over the past 1 year, I got a lot of requests for value stream, and this is, on a very similar domain. I'm sure many of my customers will at least appreciate. I'm having a look at your timeline right now. So just see if I reach out to my customers, what can they test for you? And I'm on your slide. You're saying that by the end of Q1, there'll be APIs for project level, and there'll be project level charts as well. And
it will be the project level charts for deployment frequency already exist. And at the end of the quarter, there will be group level charts for deployment frequency, and we should have APIs for lead time for changes and change failure rate.
Right. So at the end of Q1, they can test all the APIs.
Well, 3 out of the 4. The time to restore service is going to be in Q2.
Got it.
Because this is optimized team, I didn't want to presume their availability. They promised me to do this in Q1, so I assume this will be Q2.
Fair enough, yeah. No, I don't mean to apply pressure. I mean, that was not my intent. I was just trying to figure out what's available for people to test.
Yeah. If they have self-managed and they want to check out the group level API, they can, but it's not very performant. So I would suggest to hold off until after this milestone.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Let me see if I have anything else, and then we can drop.
Or a quick question. You mentioned workspaces, and I'm interested in that. Do you have any timeline when the first VC will be? Because I can never find that.
So it's actually managed, not me. This came up in one of our conversations of whether or not to support this on the instance level. And I think we shouldn't, and the workspace kind of solves my problem. So I was really happy to hear that there's plans for it, but I don't know. I can check.
Customers asking for that. Okay, I just wondered.
Okay, so some of what the future holds for DORA4. So we talked about workspace, or instance level DORA4, gamification. So let me just open this link. We kind of talked about how people want to compare. Why isn't any of the link working? 1 second. People want to compare how they're performing versus others. So we kind of want to introduce these badges that tell you, hey, you're doing really well, you're elite, or not, based on others. So go ahead and check out this issue. Of course, this isn't going to be this year, but still, just from conversations with the engineers, they're so excited to get this forward that they just automatically already opened up design issues and implementation issues. People are really, really excited about this effort.
Yeah, we'd probably have to make tags for each of the different metrics, because
yeah, it would be per chart, or have like similar to the score that value stream analytics have. Then we have benchmark view of similar companies. We talked about that. In product tips and tricks to improve performance, we also kind of touched on that, how we could help users find the bottlenecks, whether it's manual jobs or help them, automate more, do auto rollback, other things like that. I think is really interesting. In the really far future, we could think about seeing even how a CI/CD pipeline is built in a similar company that's an elite, and see like what the difference is. Of course, we would need some kind of consent and anonymization, but just comparing the pipelines would be really interesting. We have all this really great data that we can use and help users out. We talked about ability to select multiple environments, and this one's really interesting, export historical data capabilities. So we talked about the fact that we have performance limitations, and at the moment we're only showing 90 days, for example, but maybe you're interested in more. So the code coverage team already has this export capability for older data into CSV. And so we kind of want to mimic that and allow you to export historical data so that you can use it later on. There's a bunch more issues tied to the DORA4 Epic, but these are just ones that I chose to highlight. But feel free to go into any issue and ask me any question. I'm more than happy to explain about it. Yeah, that's it for the presentation.
Thanks, Orit. That was awesome. I know we went way over time, and I appreciate you sticking around a long time. I know there's lots of questions in the doc.
If really, I didn't even notice.
I know. If you could answer those asynchronously, that'd be great.
Sure.
But yeah, this is awesome. I'm really looking forward to this. This is kind of a passion of mine as well, just getting these into GitLab. And I'm glad we're putting these into Ultimate.
Yes, thank you for your time, Orit. This is actually super relevant to some e-learning courses that Field Enablement is working on for the sales team around Gartner's report on value stream delivery platforms. So I actually plan to use some snippets from this presentation for that. So again, thank you for the time. Thank you for those who stayed over, and we appreciate you getting to those questions in the doc. If you need anything, let me know. But I hope everyone has a great day.
Great. Thank you all for going over and listening to me.
It was great.
I'm here for any questions.
Cheers.
It's awesome. Thanks, Orit.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.